Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of The Road Less Taken, our web series where we are in conversation with people who've made unconventional career choices and have had great times and tasted success. This is brought to you by Nexus Consulting. I am Venky Srinivasan, your host. And today I'm in conversation with someone who I've admired through my growing up days. I've read a lot of her work with great interest. She's written numerous articles covering mainly cricket, but all aspects and facets of various Indian sports. She's written a couple of fabulous books as well on cricket, one of which you can see in the bookshelf right behind me. Our guest in this episode of TRLT is Sharda Ugra. Hi Sharda, very warm welcome to The Road Less Taken. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi Venky, thanks for having me. It's great. I watched some of your other shows that you saw. I'm just looking forward to our chat today.
Absolutely. You're a truly unique person. So let me ask you about how it all started. You became a journalist, and in that you chose the niche of being a sports journalist. When did this career choice or how did it happen, and how did family react at that time?
I didn't become a journalist and become a sports journalist. I started out being a sports journalist. It's the only thing I've done. It's the only beat I followed. I've been very fortunate in many ways because you asked about my parents, I had a very supportive family. They all thought it was a bit of because I was always a sports fan and a cricket fan right from a very young age. I grew up in Bombay in a suburb called Bhandup. And we grew up in what we didn't know was actually a gated community of people that lived in the same company that my dad worked for. So there was accommodation, and there was flats, and there was playing fields. You know, we had two grounds, we had a badminton court, we had a swimming pool, and there were girls and boys, and we all grew up playing sport together. And I played cricket with the boys. India won in 1983. I remember that very, very clearly. I was born in 68. I was basically in school. It was a big drama. And I remember the first tour was 79. My father had a lot of interest in cricket. My father and my mother's brother, my uncle. So they were the people that introduced me to the game in the sense of, the heroes. And I remember when I was traveling by train once, I was given a copy of, great cricketers or something like that at A.H. Wheeler bookstall. And it had stories about, Sobers and Allen Davidson and Gaskar and Prasanna and the quartet and, this little 20 rupee book that it was. And I remember being a fan of sports right from the beginning. I was a very average and a useless athlete. I was taken on cricket teams just because I loved fielding. I enjoyed it. I was quite good at it. I was absolutely rubbish. I don't even know what order batsman I would have been. I was like, barely I qualified for number 6.
Hard hitting lower middle order.
Hard hitting dispensable lower middle order. I kept wickets. I remember once. It was great fun. I remember the stumping I pulled off. My highest score is 32. So I grew up in that entire environment. And when I was taught when the boys started bowling with season ball, as we called it. Of course, I was such a chicken. I was absolutely useless. I didn't know how to handle it, no coaching, nothing. But you just got along, you played. They tolerated because they needed numbers and that. So I grew up in that environment, and I loved books, and I loved reading, and I loved following cricket, reading about sport. So it just so happened, I've told the story many times, but people are still astonished by it, that I had a friend in college who was also like me, a big fan of sport. And it was just came up to her one day and she said, listen, why don't we go and interview Imran Khan? And we were in college. We were like in first year, second year of college. And she said, because he's coming and we'll say we are interviewing for the college magazine. She was a massive Imran fan, massive. So we'll say we are coming for college magazine. So he said, okay, let's try. And so literally the first thing that worked, and then we found that it worked, and we did our homework, and the article got published. And then we said, okay, we can go around and do, we can interview people when they pass into town, and we'll do our work and we'll do our research. And the 1987 World Cup took place. So we were able to do a lot of work in that.
Yeah.
And literally, strangely enough, I always knew I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be in the business of words, writing, editing, reading, whatever it was. I wanted to do some kind of journalism,
Right.
And this is the 1980s where there were not, 1980s, 1990s, where the opportunities were not that many for humanities students.
Right.
Yeah. The stream of education thought of as absolutely useless, which we now say is very, very important. Humanities are very important. We are teaching engineers humanities now. Understand?
Right.
So that's how it started. And Midday newspaper put out its first and last advertisements for a sports reporter. And this friend of mine, Damola, her mother saw it. She told my friend, she said, tell Sharda to apply. And I had, of course, my little writing with me from the publishing of this tabloid paper that had published. And I went and they just looked at me and they said, okay. And there were three of us used to do these interviews, another friend of mine. And so the editor said, but why are there three of you? And we said, but we are friends. We had
It's like a package deal, take all of us.
Exactly. And we interviewed some pretty big names. We interviewed Vivian Richards, we interviewed Kapil Dev, we interviewed Krishnamacharya Shrikant.
I'm assuming very, very different levels of access available those days as opposed to today, right?
Oh, absolutely. Just phone call to the hotel was what happened.
Wow.
Notes left in the lobby. See, we have left a note for you. Absolutely different levels of that, players would be leaving tickets for perfect strangers to come and watch the match. Unthinkable, really. Bruce Reed, I remember as well. John Wright, who then went on to become the coach, who, when I told him that this had happened, he was absolutely shocked. So I said, I'm still here. So we interviewed a whole lot of people. John Tricos, really interesting bunch and a good mix. So that when I went to apply for that job, I had a name and a byline in the paper.
Right.
And that was just what the tabloid newspapers was looking for.
Right.
And they said, okay, when can you join? So I said, I was just so daft. It'll never happen now. I said, I'm going for Diwali vacation. I was doing my MA, which I didn't do much of. I'm going for Diwali vacation to Nagpur. He said, oh, there's a match in Nagpur. Can you cover it for us? I said, okay. Yeah. So this was Nehru Cup semi-final, Pakistan versus England, I think, if I'm not wrong. I think it was Pakistan. And they said, yeah, cover it. So I went and I wrote a report on it. And so that was my test and it worked. And they said, fine. And they hired me. And I stayed as sports journalist since. And every time you look at it, you say you had all these great chances that you got, and it was such a great environment to work. It was a young organization. It had a very young sort of boss. The number one in management was Tariq Ansari. And Prem Panikkar was recounting to me when he used to work for Midday. He said something happened at some time and I just said, shut up. And I was saying this to like the number one, the big boss, go away or something. I was just, so it was that kind of a place, it just put up with all this, it put up with all this sort of energy and sort of madness and craziness. And that's how I started. And I've been doing it ever since. And I'm always grateful to Midday for giving me this opportunity to work in what was a city newspaper at that time.
Right.
It was the number one tabloid in Bombay. And it used to be printed at around 11 o'clock in the morning. You used to get edition. So you had to be in office at around 5. So you were doing a completely different kind of sports reporting as compared to what the broadsheets were doing. And I've stayed there since in various forms, various media. Love the job. Absolutely. I tell everybody, best job in the world.
Right. And after that, of course, you've done several of the top-notch publications. What was your first, what are the memories of your first overseas tour to watch India play?
My first overseas tour was in Sharjah. Okay. It was in the 91. It was called, what is it called? Coca-Cola Cup or something like that. That was one of those, like Pepsi, Coca-Cola used to keep having these cups. Yeah. Do you remember the one in which the lights went off and the umpires didn't call the match off?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the game we were at, that game.
Okay.
And literally we were sitting there in the stand where the person next to you, you're separated from the dressing room literally by the length of your arm. And all kinds of. So Imran was there at that tournament as well. I remember he was there, and Sanjay Manjrekar was there. This was and Tendulkar had made his debut at the time. I joke with everyone that Tendulkar and I made our debut at the same time, November 1980.
Yeah, okay.
Same time. So because we are who we are, we don't have to retire.
Correct.
So that was the first tour. It was a very extraordinary sort of a tour because that was the time South Africa came back into international cricket. They were coming to meet the ICC. And Kuldeep Lal, who worked with AFP, the French news agency at the time, He said, I'm going to the airport. The South African contingent is coming. Do you want to turn up? Because I was not a morning paper. And, it's not that. So I said, yeah, why not? And then I went and met, thanks to Kuldeep, we left at some 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning or something. We were taking a taxi to go to Dubai airport. And so literally there were like these lucky breaks. So I met Ali Bakar, Krish McAdoo, Jeff Dakin, the three representatives who had come to ask for an invitation to the ICC. We interviewed them, interviewed Bakar. So it was a just crazy sort of series of events, and the tournament was fun. It turned out very well. I got all the sort of because for midday you're not doing straight reporting, you're doing features, you're trying to talk to players, you're doing all the other stuff. So you did all that. You got those stories, and you came back, and the office was happy. And I remember the night before I was coming back, and the assignment was over. I'd gone out to have dinner or something. I came back, and there was a message waiting for me. It said, "We are very proud of what you've done for us.
Oh, nice.
We are very proud of your coverage. It's been very good. Congratulations." And this and that. And this is the boss. I think it's Tariq Ansari who sent that telex. And as a young journalist, you never forget that you were shown this appreciation by your organization, and you were recognized that, it was like you had a team behind you here. And I saw all the other reporters that were there, and they were always under pressure. They were always sort of, the office was nagging them. And I just felt I had this team behind me in the midday newspaper in Bombay that was there, that was watching, what's the phrase they use? You had my back, that's what they say.
You had your back.
Yeah. So it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. And then I went to Wimbledon with the same organization. They sent me to Wimbledon the year Agassi won.
Nice.
I had a great time. I really had a good time. Yeah.
Right. What differences did you see when you moved, organizations? Because midday was this non-core, you weren't doing like this deep analysis of what happened during a day's play or in the match, etc., etc. And then when you moved to the Hindu and then subsequently to ESPN and so on, did you have to like do a lot more in terms of preparation, in terms of analytics and so on?
It gave you a completely different view of the sport. So what you learned at midday was you learned to look for all the angles and all the other stuff that really worked with you, say maybe 10-15 years down that after that, you got into that naturally. At the Hindu, what you learned was discipline and rigor, that if you were going to be at a match, you had to be there for the first ball of the match, and you had to be there right at the end, and you had to have your stats correct, you had to have all your dismissals down absolutely accurately. You had to have your own scoreboard. So there was no cricket info at the time. So you were carrying, maybe there was, and we didn't know, we were working with typewriters, Venky.
Right.
I love to boast about it. Yeah. We were carrying typewriters and printers around to print and fax things and all that. So you had to work with that. You had the discipline and the rigor that came. You were discovering, so I was like some 23-year-old reporter who went to Wimbledon. So obviously the chance would have been to think that, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. But what happened with the Hindus that you covered a lot of domestic cricket, you covered a lot of, I did a lot of table tennis tournaments, volleyball tournaments. So you met all kinds of people. You met all these other players. I did a lot of India A cricket. So Rahul Dravid, Saurav Ganguly, VVS Lakshman were coming through at that time, in that. And it was a fantastic experience, because then literally like the base of your contacts and your knowledge of sport in India was built. And it became a huge advantage for me when I went into India today. I had to go to Delhi, so which is again a whole cultural shift from Bombay. And then you understood the whole gravy train that was Indian sport, when you went there. But all the people that I met at the Hindu while working for the Hindu, all the people that I knew while working for midday, interviewing them, talking to them, or covering their games, or doing whatever it was. Hindu sent me to two events, one in Dhaka. It was like an A-team tournament. Sandeep Patil was coach, and Bangladesh beat India A for the first time.
Okay.
It was just absolute pandemonium in that stadium. It was like fans, and it was just mad. And Sandeep Patil gave great quotes after that, and it was just completely crazy. I remember so vividly that victory, the Bangladesh victory. And then to the World Cup in 1996 into Sri Lanka, when there was the bombing, and when just after they had the bombing, and they had Zimbabwe came and played there. So I did. So you just got a very good grounding in all your contacts, and all the kind of people that you knew and you met. That worked when you went to India today, where you were doing a different kind of reporting. You were writing features. that would hold till the end of the week, So
Yeah.
if say the match is finished on Monday, you got to have something the reader will see on Sunday, which will still be fresh and relevant and it'll be new. And that's where the whole midday experience sort of worked for me, because you had training in doing that kind of, you'd already been trained in that sense.
Right.
And then from India Today, I came back to Cricket Info, which was like diving back into cricket, which is my favorite sport. And I loved it. I remember so clearly the first day at Cricket Info, I walked in. There were 11 television sets on, and there was cricket on each one of them. It was complete heaven.
From Zimbabwe, cricket from
it was complete heaven. 11 television sets all had cricket on them. It was like, this is it. I can die today.
Right.
It was lovely. It was lovely. Yeah.
Right. How have you seen this whole? We spoke about this earlier a little bit. This whole dynamic between journalists and players across all sports, more so cricket in India, has dramatically changed, and I would probably say that the unfortunate events surrounding match fixing, etc., had kind of made those even more stark. How do you see that change today, and has it made life for people like you much tougher in that sense?
I think what it's done is not made. I mean, I am just very grateful at this point that I'm not a 21-year-old journalist starting out. I'm just so grateful that I'm not a young journalist starting out, because it's particularly in cricket. In other sports, it is about, I cannot tell you how much simpler to do things. In Indian football, for example, I know that there is ISL and there is Let's Football and everything, but you have players that are, along with being accessible, completely outspoken. They say whatever they want about whoever they want, players, coaches, whatever. So and I just started covering, doing a little bit of writing on Indian football when I was with ESPN for about 4 years. And it was just like, oh my God, this is heaven. So you picked up the phone and there's, cricket particularly has changed out of recognition virtually. I don't think match fixing was as much of a thing as it was a thing of the numbers of journalists that increased, the advent of television, news television into this whole business, and the general suspicion of journalists per se. So like that. Everyone's out to get us. And what's happening now, the other thing that has happened is, I don't know whether you've been following this. Of course, who has not followed it? Ashwin's great interviews with Sridhar about the India-Australia series that just ended. Those little segments that he did, talking about various, not little, very, very detailed. It was like basically he was doing all our work for us. And they were wonderful interviews, and they were just told you great stories, which you would have had to, as reporters, we would have had to work like donkeys and dogs to get that material, basically. So we were really happy. And then someone said that, oh, they're not going to need us anymore, because I said, but what happens when you lose and the team doesn't do well? Then what's going to happen? I'm sorry, but we are the sort of the guys that must cause the problem. And every time somebody gets offended if you write something mean about them, when they lose, or you do, so then it gets very difficult to tell them that. And of course, everyone gets offended. And if I was in their place, I also would get offended. I would get angry. But at the same time, as you grow older, you would help that there's some kind of balance that comes. When players retire, they turn into completely different people. They can't turn into completely different, accessible, chatty by and large, unless you have pissed them off so badly that they won't talk to you. I don't know, ever. So it's that kind of this thing.
You've had your share of sharp words at you from big players who've been upset by what you've written about them.
Not mean words. I mean, like not like I have to say this about Saurav Ganguly, that I have said just horrendous things about him. I said I have written not unfair. I've said what according to me are absolutely fair things I have said about him. I have said truthful things about him. But it's like water of a duck's back. He is a complete gentleman when it comes to that. He does not take any. Either he's going to send a hit squad and just kill me one day and then it's all done. But he's just completely, almost sagely in that sense, that he's almost like, he has this kind of regal kind of approach to it. That it's the rabble are shouting. They have to shout. They're rabble. So it's like that. But but the thing is, and you have exchanged words with players, that, and you've tried to explain your position, or a journalist position to them, and it's gone on for some time, and you've had about a year in which they've been like Cold War, and they will not talk to you and all that, and then it's kind of found itself, because you have taken pot shots at somebody else whom they may not also like, yeah. So, or I understand where you come from, kind of a position. It's not like it's said, but it's almost unsaid, and it sort of returns to its own equilibrium in that sense. But that is a particular generation of player that you grew up following and covering and so on. Not like the younger bunch of players. It's much more different. It's very formal. It's sort of in the Dhoni, post-Dhoni era, it's completely changed. So I did a lot of traveling, particularly Ganguly, Dravid, a little bit of Kumble's captaincy as well, and a little bit of Dhoni's early sort of time, early captaincy when he was just around the World Cup, just before the World Cup. So it was a different. So those players are the ones that you have some kind of equation with.
Right.
Younger people, it's like you're starting absolutely afresh. So if you have, and now they've got managers, and there are these various layers of gatekeepers, and they've got social media that's there. I mean, I suppose it's the same with every large sport. When it grows that big and it has these stars, but you feel a bit sad. So I said this somewhere else, that we are not going to remember players of the quality of Rohit Sharma or Virat Kohli by the Instagram messages or their video podcast or the interviews that they gave to Mark Nicholas or whoever it is. They will be remembered for generations to come by the words that were written about them in a way that was just, oh, he is a fantastic batsman, beyond that kind of a thing. There has to be more, in a way, I'm very happy that I belong to the generation that had Dravid, Kumble, Srinath, Tendulkar, Ganguly, Lakshman, and so on, because it's like we took out all our great energies and our sort of complete emotional response to the way they played and what they did and what they were able to do, and it's out there, and it's in words. All of us, like a whole generation of journalists of my sort of age, and not my age, some younger as well, that wrote that. It's very extensively covered, and you can't produce that in a cricketer's book where he's not going to tell you anything new, or whatever, so I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, that it has to reflect the time that there is, there has to be, you do see like someone like Pujara talking, doing a lot of interviews. So you would think that access it works both ways. It's not just, we are not just dying to talk to you because we are greedy journalists who want quotes. We are also recorders in a way. A journalist of a particular time are recorders of a history of a passage of history that should be there. Who has forgotten the line about Amar Singh? He came off the wicket like the crack of doom.
Crack of doom, yeah.
I mean, if you would have not written that, how would we even have any idea? I've got this picture behind me. I was talking to you about it. It's the first team, the first Indian test team that is there. So it's so that is just magic. And so that's what I'm saying. So you will have pictures, you'll have Instagram, whatever things. You'll have these lovely interviews that Ashwin has done with Sridhar. But I'm just saying that I don't know whether it's, I'm just sounding like some old granny who's really angry that no one's giving you interviews, or whether it's just an interesting sort of a take on your personality and who you are, where you come from, rather than a manufactured branding exercise that some of these interviews end up being.
Right. Speaking of writing,
long rant. Don't start me on this.
No, but I want to stay on that in a slightly different direction and ask you, who's been your favorite, sports writer or cricket writer?
Peter Roebuck, I would have to say, because of the fact that he wrote in such simple language, and he just said such deep things in simple language. He just made the most. If you read his profiles of people, I remember he wrote a great line about he said all-rounders have much more on their plates than they have on their mind, and you just burst out laughing because you think of all the all-rounders that you know. So I think he was even talking about when Yuvraj had reached his all-rounder stage, by chucking or whatever. So Peter Roebuck, definitely. I have a great respect and admiration for a lot of the writers of today as well. Greg Baum from the Australian, Gideon Haigh as well, a lot of writers of that time. Ted Corbett was a favorite because of he was a friend of mine, of the flavor of the language which he brought to his writing in the Hindu. He had such humor and so when he wrote, he told you that there's another way to write about cricket. It's not all serious, and you can make fun of people, and so I had that. I love K.N. Prabhu's writing because again it represented another time when you read bits of it as well. So I enjoyed all those sort of things. And as a young sort of a 20-year-old in the 1990s, I was a bit prickly about how Indians were looked at in cricket, and I was a bit this thing about English writers and so on. I love Mike Marquez's writing, a very different take on sport, a very different take on sport, and one that opened up a whole world to us, to a lot of people. It opened up that whole world.